I will be happy to answer the questions if there are any. And I think that there are a lot of other issues that we could discuss tomorrow. Because I've tried to present only the position of the Ukrainian language, but there are, of course, questions relating to how to balance the Ukrainian language and what the Ukrainian language, the Ukrainian state has done in order to provide for the language needs of other language groups in Ukraine.
Sí, en primer lloc, moltes gràcies per la presentació, que ha estat realment aclaridora, hi havia moltíssima informació. Un aclariment sobre un dels molts aspectes que ha tocat la ponent. Fins on jo he entès, ens ha plantejat que el sistema educatiu a Ucraïna es divideix en línies lingüístiques, són sistemes lingüístics basats en llengües diferents. Em demano si hi ha experiències d'escoles que funcionin en rus i ucraïnès de manera sistemàtica, qui hi va, qui no hi va i quins resultats tenen aquest tipus d'escoles en termes de coneixements i en termes d'usos lingüístics de la població escolar, si això s'ha estudiat.
Thank you for the question. When I mentioned a little bit that starting from 1992, the Ukrainian state has pursued one idea. So they want to open schools with languages of instruction, not depending on the linguistic composition of the area, but on the ethnic composition. That means that basically Russian language schools could be opened only in areas where Russians constitute a majority. However, there are experiences that there are bilingual schools in which both Russian and Ukrainian are used, and there are a lot of schools like this. And there are also grounds to believe that there is hidden, they call it hidden bilingualism, that although they say that schools operate in Ukrainian and Russian, there still exist a lot of schools in which Russian is used as the dominant language. However, I think that the idea is to have bilingual schools, and they might be a good solution for solving the problem of this, of how to balance Russian and Ukrainian in schools.
Sí, hola, bona tarda. Volia fer 3 preguntes senzilles. La primera seria si pot donar més informació sobre l'estat actual de la tramitació parlamentària d'aquest esborrat que circula des del mes de setembre, és a dir, és previst que hi hagi una votació aviat o continua sent un projecte que s'ha presentat i que no té calendari. La segona qüestió és sobre... Vostè ha dit que Ucraïna ha ratificat la Carta Europea de les Llengües Regionals i Minoritàries. El que no ha dit vostè és que Ucraïna va trigar 10 anys a produir el primer informe en aplicació de la Carta, i el que tampoc ha dit és que el Comitè d'Experts i el Consell de Ministres, el Comitè de Ministres del Consell d'Europa van criticar severament Ucraïna, per l'aplicació que havia fet de la Carta, i en concret en l'àmbit de l'educació. Per exemple, hi ha un paràgraf en l'informe del Comitè d'Experts on s'esmenta que l'obligació de fer un examen en ucraïnès a les institucions d'ensenyament superior pot ser un factor que faci que els membres de grups minoritaris no freqüentin escoles on la llengua vehicular és la llengua de la minoria. Per tant, tindríem un element polític que condiciona aquest declivi en el nombre, en aquest cas, d'escoles russòfones. Bé, potser això és massa llarg. Concentrem la pregunta. Quina opinió té vostè dels comentaris que ha fet el Consell d'Europa sobre l'aplicació de la Carta Europea a Ucraïna. I tercera qüestió, molt petita, quina és la situació en aquest moment a la República Autònoma de Crimea, especialment no tant pel que fa al rus, sinó pel que fa al tàtar de Crimea, que és una llengua que no ha esmentat vostè a l'exposició i que em sembla que és la llengua, entre cometes, pròpia de Crimea.
Yes, you're right. I tried to, in my presentation today, I just concentrated on what has been done with regard to the Ukrainian language. As you have noticed, I have not mentioned what has been done with regard to other languages. It's a one-sided presentation, and we have lots of time tomorrow to discuss it. With regard to the draft, it's a full-fledged draft which has not been voted yet. It was offered to the Verkhovna Rada, which is the parliament of Ukraine, for consideration. However, there was already an expert opinion from one of those institutes which give an expert opinion on whether this draft is something feasible, plausible or not. And they said that this is a draft which stands as a draft which could be voted, and I think that probably in the near future they are really going to vote it. But it should be also taken into consideration that in the recent years Ukraine has had, I don't know, dozens of drafts of laws, and it may be that it's going to be just one of the drafts. But the fact that it has come up now with the change of the government, it in a way illustrates the present tendency of less Ukrainization and more pro-Russian approach. So with regard to the European Charter for Regional and Minority Languages, so if you are aware, Ukraine has had very peculiar experience of even ratifying the Charter, so which was actually ratified twice. It was ratified in 1999, and then the Constitutional Court annulled this ratification law on procedural grounds, and it was ratified again in 2005. And it should be mentioned that the second ratification document contained much weaker obligations on the part of Ukraine, while the first ratification document contained a clear numerical threshold of 20% that would allow minorities that constitute 20% in a given territory to have education in their native language, to have their language as an official language in the territory. So this 20% threshold was abolished in the second ratification document. And I know, of course, that the European authorities are very much critical of the implementation of both the European Charter and the Framework Convention, but I think that the reason is actually common for many post-Soviet republics, is that there is huge discrepancy between what is written on paper and what is done in practice. And my talks with also the representatives of the advisory committee under the Framework Convention showed that they also experience a huge problem, because the authorities themselves are convinced that they have implemented it. And from the European perspective, the implementation is either poor or non-existent. And of course, I have not mentioned the Crimean Tatars, so I can clarify that the Ukrainian state is a unitary state. However, it has federative component, the Autonomous Republic of the Crimea, which has, as I've mentioned, it's the only region in Ukraine which has the largest Russian population, and the Russians are the majority. And the question was with regards to Crimean Tatars. Crimean Tatars were people who were deported from the Crimea during the Stalinist repressions, and they now actually have been granted a chance to get back, and the Crimea has a constitution, and according to this constitution, the official, the state language, of course, is the Ukrainian state language, but the official languages of the Republic, of the Crimean Republic, are the Russian language and the Crimean Tatar. So I don't know if that answers, but I have just not purposefully have not mentioned those things, just concentrated on what has been done in Ukraine with regard to the Ukrainian language, because it was actually one of the challenges that the Ukrainian state faced at the beginning of independence, how to revive the language that was actually not used anymore.
I'll ask it in English, thank you. Two simple questions. One is, do you know of any research to look at the competence in Ukrainian and in Russian or other national minority languages according to the different kinds of schools? In other words, if a school teaches through Russian, do they complete their education with a satisfactory command of Ukrainian? That is one question. And another one is, you've talked about Ukrainian language policy inside the Ukraine, but of course there are minorities, long-standing minorities speaking Ukrainian in many Eastern Europe and Central European countries. Is there a national policy to support these minorities? Are there international agreements? Could you say a little bit about that?
Well, frankly speaking, I don't know if there is research on the competence with regard to the competence in, for instance, in schools with with Russian and Ukrainian language speaking, Ukrainian language as a language of instruction. I don't know, but I understand your concern, because it just an example from another state, from Belarus, where really, so in Belarusian language medium schools, the level of education proved to be lower than in those with Russian language as a medium of instruction. I don't know, frankly speaking, whether it's the case. And of course there are, with regard to your second question, when I mentioned that the 1999 decision actually provoked a diplomatic war between Russia and Ukraine, there are agreements, of course, between both Russia and Ukraine which support Russian-speaking minority in Ukraine and Ukrainian-speaking minority in Russia, and also between the neighboring states, between Hungary and Ukraine, and between Belarus and Ukraine, because there is a big Hungarian minority in Ukraine, which and Hungarian schools, and also I think that many one tendency is that many minority language schools actually survive, or not only schools but also media survive thanks to the support from kin states. So, and many school books are published in kin states, not in the state itself. That's why there are these bilateral agreements.
Hi ha una paraula demanada. Si hi ha algú més que vulgui intervenir, i pregunto que es va fent tard, bé, doncs donem aquesta paraula i tancaríem llavors ja la sessió.
Sí, molt ràpidament perquè és tard i voldria felicitar la ponent per una conferència molt interessant i la pregunta és molt concreta. Ha fet una distribució, suposo que no perfecta, com sol passar sempre, entre la majoria est del país de majoria russòfona i la part oest on predomina l'ucraïnès. I també una altra diferència entre més predomini històricament en l'àmbit rural de l'ucraïnès i en canvi del rus en l'àmbit metropolità o urbà. La pregunta concreta és saber, per la importància suposo que pot tenir per la llengua, si hi ha algun nucli com per exemple Lviv o Lvov, és el nom de la ciutat de l'est, Lvov, potser pronuncio malament, Lvov, on tot i ser una àrea metropolitana important, doncs la llengua dominant sigui l'ucraïnès.
Yes, this is traditionally, historically, Ukraine has been divided in a way that in the eastern part there was more Russian dominance, while in the western part, so probably there were conditions for the development of national identity and national language, and that's why there is this clear-cut divide, I would say, between Eastern and Western Russian and Ukrainian-speaking territories. And there is dominance of Russian in metropolitan areas, but Lvov is a peculiar city from this point of view, and there really, so Russian is something that is not very welcome at all, and Ukrainian is a dominant language, but of course there is a Russian-speaking part of the population. But generally, if you take Kiev as well, the capital city, so that there the dominant language is still Russian, and in many other cities. But of course the Ukrainian language, I think that the progress that it has made since the early 90s, the late 80s is incredible, and I think it's really commendable for other states to follow.
Moltes gràcies a les dos intervinents. Ja s'ha dit des d'aquí a la sala que crec que han estat molt aprofundides i molt interessants les seves intervencions, per tant, gràcies una vegada més. I només recordar als que assistiu en aquest acte que aquesta mirada dels reptes de les comunitats lingüístiques des de la perspectiva jurídica tindrà continuació l'any vinent, és a dir, que la sessió de la setmana passada més la sessió d'avui la completarem amb una o dues sessions que es fan entre el mes de març i el mes d'abril, de les quals ja rebreu la corresponent informació. Moltes gràcies.